Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Sudeep. Good morning. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thank you so much for taking time out for this.
Thank you, Jagmohan, for inviting me to be on the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. As I've told you before, I've heard some episodes and I'm very, very, very excited to be part of this. So thanks a lot for letting me be here, and I look forward to our conversation today.
The pleasure is all mine. Sudeep, so I did get a bio from you, which is perfect because it's more easier than for me to go and search the internet and figure out stuff, which I do anyway. That's also interesting in its own way. And what I found interesting was this: the first line, it says, Sudeep is a Bengaluru-based writer, poet, and creative solutions consultant.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you is it necessarily in that order: writer, poet, and creative solutions consultant?
Jagmohan, you're the first person to pick up on this.
Okay.
uh, yes, actually, it is. Because this is reflective of my journey as a whole. So I started off as someone who wrote, writing being all encompassing. Uh, I then moved on to being a poet specifically. I discovered poetry later in my journey of being a writer, and then I focused on poetry. I would say almost full time for a while, and at some point, I found myself being able to offer my services as someone with experience in writing and poetry, and um, how do you leverage these two creative things as tools to help people with solve for certain problems that they're facing with their solutions, and hence from writer to poet to creative solutions consultant. Of course, the three are not mutually exclusive at any given point in time. Sorry, but definitely yes. I'm actually quite fascinated and impressed that you picked up on that.
Great. It's the first line. Somebody is written I don't know. It just came across like, okay, fine. I also thought, okay, can you be a poet before you can be a writer? No, poet comes under the umbrella of writing. Creative solutions consultant also comes under the umbrella of both of these things. So
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
there is an order to it. But the reason I wanted to start with that was today a lot of people love that creative solutions consultant part, right? I come across a lot of people who love marketing, and the creative solutions part come into picture when helping businesses find their market. So that's where I was coming from. To people who are looking at a career like creative solutions consultant, I just wanted to point out, bring attention to the fact that somebody was a writer, somebody was a poet, and then comes, as a consequence, or pretty much as a, side effect, that they are a creative solutions consultant, and not because they're a creative solutions consultant, they're a writer or a poet. So that's where I was coming from.
There's
Uh,
this movie, Jagmohan, called Pyar Ke Side Effects, and a sequel, Shadi Ke Side Effects. So if a
right.
movie is ever made about my life, or if I choose to make a movie about mine, I think it'll be called Writing Ke Side Effects.
Writing side effects. Right. It's sometimes when people graduate and they're looking for jobs and then they find their interest, this is what they want to do, they kind of lose track as to where it all starts, so they have no idea. I think that's where this is, really nice to start off from. But having said that, I'm going to take a step back and, ask you, for how did you, growing up, was writing your passion, or when did it first start to come to you? Because writing is something that everybody hates, most of the people, right? I don't know if they hate, maybe because it's difficult, therefore they hate, or something about it. But how did you, kind of get into writing? And yeah, if you can, describe your journey as to how you got into it.
You want the honest answer? Or you want the
Honest.
manicured answer? Acha, the honest answer. Okay.
It could be an accident for all. I no, 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 nothing like that. I
No,
just
I'll tell
wrote
you.
something.
I'll tell you why I asked whether you want the honest answer, because when you first said, I know some people hate writing, I raised my eyebrows because I was very taken aback by the statement. I think sometimes what ends up happening is that when you're so into writing and when you've been doing it for so long, you kind of start to, rather, you stop seeing writing from non writers' POVs, right? And then you think, why would anyone not like writing, right? Writing is so amazing. But yes, you're right. There was a point, now that I think of it, when I did hate writing.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, when I was in school, in school we all have those essays, right? Those essays in,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
term they use? Composition, right?
Composition. Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Although composition is a process, they've turned it into a noun. So
Yes.
no, the composition means these many words and this is the format. So I used to absolutely hate that. So my favorite picnic, my day at the post office, those kinds of topics. Now my grandmother, right? She was brought up in pre-independence India, was taught by Irish nuns, and has always had a passion for the English language. So, knowing that, I decided to take shameless advantage. So I
Right.
used to go to
Okay.
her and I used to tell her, listen, I have this homework. And the grandparent grandchild equation, right? They'll do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
I said, okay, can you just write this for me? So she did that once. She did that the second time. She did that the third time. The fourth time, I remember, or thereabouts, going to her and telling her, hey, can you just write this thing for me? She said, no. I was taken aback. I'm like, how can a grandparent, it did not compute. How can a grandparent refuse a grandchild? I said, no, but you've always done this for me. I need you to continue doing it for me. She said, no. I'll do you one better, she said. And what she did was she taught me to sequence and structure my thoughts. How do you construct the flow of an essay? How do you bring the word composition back to a verb from a noun? Right? That's what she
Wow.
taught me. So being able to sequence that, okay, so this is how we talk about the beginning of something. This is how we introduce something. Here's how we build it up, right? Here is where we drop some interesting anecdotes or some, talk about something fascinating for the reader. And this is how you start to draw it to a conclusion. And then this is how you conclude. So she walked me through a few of those, and she empowered me then to be able to write these things myself. So that is truly where Jagmohan, my journey as a writer, I would say, began, when I gained the ability to be able to compose my thoughts in an order. Because writing is not so much about just putting your pen to paper and starting to write. There's a lot of prep work that goes on before you put your pen to paper, right? So you need to think about what you're going to write about, what it's going to convey, how people, and possibly, if you can, anticipate how your target audience is going to react to it, and then write. Of course, I didn't learn all this at a very advanced level, but that was sufficient enough for me to start. When I started, because and this is another very interesting incident. I don't know, I haven't really talked about this much in my, when I've talked about this before. But so my hometown on my dad's side is a place called Navsari in Gujarat.
Okay.
So the journey between Navsari and Mumbai, where I grew up, was 4 hours by a train called Flying Rani. Okay.
Okay.
Now, this Flying Rani train, if I'm not mistaken, would, on my way back from Navsari to Mumbai, would leave from Navsari station at 6 in the morning, which meant that we'd have to wake up at 5 in the morning. So,
Yeah.
cranky little child like me going with mom and dad to the station, and then I'm complaining about this, I'm complaining about that. I think my mom had a stroke of genius one day. She's like, listen, let's buy this whining child a book and keep him quiet for these 4 hours. So you remember those Wheeler and Sons stalls at a railway station? So there's this company called Wheeler and Sons. I believe they're a British company, and they were
Okay.
there. I don't know whether they're still there. I haven't seen them around. But these book stalls, right, with the
Yeah.
wheels on
Bookstalls
them.
I know, but I don't know Wheeler and Sons specifically. Not
I
sure.
think Wheeler was just a name, but in my head, in my child head at that time, Wheeler and Sons meant wheels. So a
Literally
cart
wheels.
with
Okay.
wheels and
Yeah.
books. Fascinated. So my mom started to buy me Archie comics.
Right.
Right. Now, Archie comics, what I love about them even till date is the way the stories are told. I mean, the art is fantastic, everything's great, but the storytelling was brilliant, right? And as I read more Archie comics, I started to understand how plot twists work,
Right.
how a cliffhanger works, right? Because it would be this story ends here, buy the next book in order to buy the next comic digest in order to read the conclusion of this epic, thrilling story, right? And then I would not be able to, because there was a limit on how many Archie comics I could own back then. So I'd have to wait for my next trip to Navsari or wait for someone to come from there to buy me that, right? So growing up, this is where it really began, I would say. And
Right.
then and then when I started to incorporate some of these techniques, I didn't know them as techniques back then, Jagmohan, but
Okay.
things that I found fascinating, I tried to incorporate into my writing. When I did that, I got a lot of attention from my school teachers, which was, for a child, obviously it's great. Your English teacher saying, amazing, great, good stuff, well done. So that is when a curiosity turned into a skill, turned into a passion.
Right.
And that was the genesis of Sudeep as a writer.
Great stuff. It's not like it's got to do with someone's intelligence or someone's anything, right? It's just circumstantial. And a lot of people in India, it's common to be good in math and science and all that. But I think there is a certain different kind of a confidence or the way you feel about yourself when you're not one of those common people, when your skills are not one of those common things which everybody in the classroom knows. And no, it just gives a different twist in perspective to me. And I've never really had any writer share a journey like this. Now it kind of all falls into place. And thank you for being honest about how your grandma played a role. And I can now see it can't be any other way. Somebody has to kind of give a different perspective to writing, like the way you said. It's not about writing; it's about structuring your thoughts. Just that one single phrase makes you think a little differently, because I still remember I used to write essay and all that, but I never I don't remember hearing anybody say it's a structuring of thoughts. Maybe Max I would have known is, hey, there's an introduction, there's a body and conclusion. This is all. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
introduction, body, conclusion. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. Sudeep, and okay, great. You get into writing. I got how you acquired those skills and all that. But how did you happen to entertain that skill or that thought as a full time career? Because I noticed that you did something. Your degree was in arts, and
Yes.
how did you get into arts? Is your family very liberal like that, or what is that all about? Because there's the fun, you do arts and then I see suddenly you're doing some disaster management as your master's program. If you can,
Oh man. Uh, I love these questions. Also, only on an Indian podcast, right?
no, it's literally like, yeah, I took arts and then I had to do disaster
Yes.
management.
But yeah, I mean, wow, man, you're making me go down memory lane, really. So, so what I told you earlier, up until that point, was literally part one of the story, right?
Right.
I left it at that point before the Avengers assembled. So let me talk to you about how the Avengers assembled for the first time,
Right.
in that sense, right? Um, I was not a very good student in school. Now, this is very interesting and ironic, and also problematic when I tell you the next thing. So, my dad is a chemistry professor, right? And my mother is a special educator,
Okay.
right? Coming from academic pedigree. My dad's in science, and my mom's a special educator in what? In maths, that too.
Oh wow. Okay.
Huh. And they have this child who's like, what? How can 2 plus 2 be 5, Sudeep? How you explain? That level. I guess growing up beyond that point, I had already learned that there's something I like, something I'm passionate about. I love reading, I love writing. So I guess I never really developed an inclination towards math, science, the hard sciences in that sense, and I wasn't performing very well in those either, right? Um, but then I was in a school in Ville Parle in Mumbai, right? I'm saying those with a bit of a Mumbai accent here. Um, in this area, in this school, in this time, so I'm talking about the early 2000s, the late 90s, when I grew up there, the only three professions you could choose from: doctor, engineer, lawyer, and in my school, it's fantastic if you do any of these three, but if not, there's always the army, which is
Ooh,
an
right.
absolutely noble profession, yes, but none of them really felt right for me. And in all the career days, they would tell doctor, engineer, lawyer, army. Never once had I met someone who's a journalist, for example. Never once did I meet someone who's a script writer, a movie producer, director. So these ideas were very alien, and then it was drilled into us that if you want to succeed in life, no, you have to do what people are doing. You have to do your JE, NEET. I remember in my 10th standard after career counseling day, I wrote a poem on that. Right? I don't have that poem with me right now, but I'll share it with you if I ever find it. But that poem's all about my confusion. What the hell do I do? Like, none of these careers are for me. Is there any place for me in this world at all? Around that time, Jagmohan, I'd started going for competitions, inter-school writing competitions and stuff, because the teachers finally deemed me worthy of sending to these competitions, right? And I went for this one casual competition. One girl cancelled, and they said, "Oh, who else can go?" Sudeep, huh, you write? No, you go. So they sent me very casually. I went. It was very exciting for me because this competition was all the way in Churni Road in Mumbai. So I had to take a train from Villeparle station to Churni Road station. Churni Road is right opposite the sea, Marine Drive. So my first experience actually going there on my own. So
Right.
fun times for me. I went over there. They had some writing assignments. I did those. They had a section where they had a bit where they asked you to speak on APJ Abdul Kalam, right? And it was something I'd never heard about, something I'd never, you know, I'd never seen a competition structured this way, where they made you write, then they took you to another room, they gave you a topic to speak on. Like, what kind of writing competition is this? I was used to these other writing competitions, write about, what if water stopped, falling from the sky? What if it stopped raining one day, right? Here the topics were different. The topics were dry river, wet tears. The topics were Sachin's bat. The topic for the extempo a portion of it was Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, right? Someone I'd read about but didn't know much about. So I did all that, right? I had a good day. I came back home. But a month later, I get called to the principal's office, and there was only up until that point one association was being called to the principal's office. Something bad's going to happen. And
Right.
here I go in, and the principal's beaming. Like, she's like, "Oh my god!" Turns out I had won a state level competition,
Wow.
and I was supposed to go represent Mumbai for at the district level competition for this thing. Great, okay, fun. I went, I did that, forgot about it. Month later, get called to the principal's office again. This time also she's smiling. Turns out I'd won the district level thing, and now I had to go represent the district at the national level. I said, okay, great. I'll go. Fun. Delhi, New Delhi, huh? So went to Delhi. I think not for the first time ever, but for the first time as a student, it was a 3 day camp. Great. Had great fun meeting some amazing human beings from all around the country. And a few months later, a few months go by, and turns out I won that. And I didn't know up until that point how big it was. It turns out that that was something called the National Balashri Competition, which so students between the ages of, I think, 10 and 16 or something are chosen every year, were chosen at that point every year from a particular field. So creative writing 5, innovative science 5, creative arts 5, and so on. they would receive an award, a national award from the President of India, who at that time, incidentally, happened to be Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
APJ Abdul, you're right. The
Yes.
moment you said your topic was APJ Abdul Kalam, I was like, oh, okay, fine. You're going to go on to collect an
That
award
connection
from
was
him.
there.
Great stuff.
So anyway, so all that happened and great life changing moment for me. But I'll tell you what really was the most impactful thing over there. It affirmed my belief in the possibility of there being more to writing than just uh, doing it just for school, right? For
Right.
competition or for school work. Because I remember meeting the editor, the then editor of the Times of India, because I wanted to meet one of his writers, Jug Suraya, whose columns I used to read. So I met him at one press conference. They made us do press conferences back then. Crazy. So I met him there, and then he said, "So what do you want to be?" I said, "I haven't really decided yet. To be honest, I guess I'll take science because my dad's a chemistry teacher." Uh, then he's like, "Why? Have you never considered being a journalist?" I said, "What? I can be a journalist?" So that is the moment where I realized really, sometimes it's just one moment, right? One
Yeah,
incident,
yeah.
which really tells you that hey, there's a possibility. Back then people told me you take arts, okay, you can take arts, but then you'll become a school teacher, right? which is a great thing, but then it's very limiting, right? If you think that you study arts and you can do only one thing in life. There's a journalist. Okay, wow, journalist maybe types होते हैं. Journalist may I can be a mixed media journalist. I can be a writer. I can be a producer. There's so much to do. That is what eventually led me after my 10th standard to taking arts, and
Right.
I did my arts. Graduated with a BA, as you know, in English literature. After which, something very funny happened. Uh, so I went to McLeodganj
Oh,
in
wow.
Himachal Pradesh.
Yeah, I've heard of that place.
And I volunteered with some organizations run by Tibetans.
Mm-hmm.
I got really very much into the Tibetan mythos and the ideology behind the Tibetan independence movement. So I said, मुझे कुछ करना है. I want to do something. I want to study peace and conflict. So in a bout of overconfidence, I applied for conflict studies at JNU, Masters in Conflict Studies at JNU. Did not get through at all. Then I applied to TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. They had a program called disaster management, and in that one module was conflict.
Right, right.
So I said, okay, try karte hain, kya hi hoga. So I did that. I got through. Was fortunate enough to get through, and that's my transition era from creative writing, so not creative writing as such, but more from arts to disaster management. I did that. I worked with the government of Haryana for 1 year after that. Um, that was interesting. I was training IAS and local Haryana cadre officers in disaster management, helping to create district disaster management plans for two districts, Sirsa and Fatehabad over there. And then, very interestingly, Jagmohan, bringing you back to the focus of the podcast, I quit. I
Right.
quit because there were many reasons I quit, but one of them was a very senior officer over there saw me training these IAS officers and he said, "बेटा तुम टीचर क्यों नहीं बन जाते?" I said, नहीं नहीं सर, अभी तो मेरा करियर शुरू हुआ है, खत्म थोड़ी करना है. That was a very bad joke in my head at that time. It still is, because you know, I had equated being a teacher to the end of that stupid saying, right? That those who can't do teach.
Right, yeah, yeah, yeah. Coaches
So,
don't play all that stuff.
but I had bought into it even at that time, right? Teacher
Right.
ban ke kya hi karunga? So I dismissed it, but then it remained in my head, right?
Mm.
And around that time, I also discovered something called Teach for India.
Right. Yeah.
So while I was in Delhi, I gave my interview, I submitted my application, and I got through. So after I quit the government of Haryana, the next thing I did was I was with Teach for India as a fellow. I did not end up completing it. It's a 2 year fellowship. I did it for about 7-8 months for once again various reasons. But that was my first immersion as a teacher
Teacher.
and my first experience of teaching young people.
And I've heard it's a pretty rigorous sort of.
It's a very rigorous, and I was assigned to. I was a valedictorian at the graduation ceremony of the training cohort of my training cohort. So Shaheen at that time uh, trusted me enough to assign me to one of the Shaheen Misri, the founder of Teach for India, the CEO of Teach for India. She assigned me to one of the schools in Chembur in Mumbai, which was considered one of the toughest schools. And I've had a very tough time. I've had kids coming at me with knives, with blades, spitting in my face, and doing a lot. But I love the experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything, right? I learned so much. I think as a teacher, Jagmohan, my experience has been you learn so much more than you teach, you
Yeah.
know? And it did teach me a lot, but it also taught me at that point that I was not ready to be a teacher full time. Certain experiences, they don't just teach you and tell you that, hey, this is what you're for. They also sometimes tell you this is not what you're for, maybe not right now at least.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the entire trajectory. I know we digressed a lot, but
No, 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 not at all.
yeah,
Perfect. It just sets it up nicely for the next part. But before
awesome.
I move on, I just have a couple of questions. You said you
Sure.
wanted to do peace and conflict, something to do with peace and conflict. You applied in JNU, you didn't get it, and then you got it, got disaster management. And this, you said you did you choose that because it had one module that had conflict related topic in it, and what percentage did that make up of the entire course that you chose?
So peace and conflict made up a very small percentage of it, to be honest.
Got it.
I did my master's thesis. My dissertation was titled Dimensions of Identity Amongst Tibetan Youth Living in Dhasa. Dhasa is a hybrid of Dharamshala and Lhasa, is what the locals often call it.
Got it.
Mini Tibet, little Tibet, right? So I went there, I interviewed, a lot of people, monks, refugees, students, did a lot of that. While peace and conflict might not have been a very core component of disaster management, I learned a lot about peace and conflict in disaster management nonetheless. Because my first internship, for example, my first field visit was to an area called Bandra Camp, which interestingly is not located in Bandra and Mumbai, but in Goregaon.
Okay.
So the reason it's called Bandra Camp is that these are people who were displaced due to the riots in the 90s.
Got it.
So they were relocated to an area in Goregaon called Bandra Camp, slum area. So we went over there and I understood firsthand what inequity is for the first time.
Right.
Inequity stemming from conflict and leading to potential conflict. Up until then, I had seen conflict as very black and white, right?
Right. Right.
Another reason I was really interested in conflict, I'm going to take you back a little right now,
Sure.
is um, at some point in around 2001, 2002, my father introduced me to Anne Frank's diary.
Right.
And I discovered about I discovered the Holocaust, what it was. Read a lot about it, read a lot more. Started watching movies on the Holocaust. Started watching movies on World War One, World War Two. He introduced me then to another book called All Quiet on the Western Front, Eric Maria Remarque. Uh, Very, very, very powerful book. Incredibly powerful book. I believe it was adapted by Netflix last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
It won at the Oscars this year, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
I started reading a lot. I started writing about the Holocaust as well.
Okay.
And I remember I wrote a few poems on the Holocaust and conflict, and I would submit them to places online. And at some point, this guy emails me from Denmark saying, hey, I'm the admin of a website called Auschwitz.dk, a Holocaust remembrance website. Can I feature your poems on there? So I said, yes, sure, please. That eventually led to, because it was such a credible site at that time, a lot of people ended up taking my poem from there, and they thought I was a survivor, a Holocaust survivor. So I used to get these emails, dear Mr. or Mrs. Pagedar, I hope you are still alive. So from students who would take it for their assignments and stuff. The reason I took you back is, I wanted to study conflict. I wanted to understand what conflict's all about, where it stems from,
Right.
to answer a very fundamental question of mine as a writer, as a teacher, as a human being. why do we fight when we can collaborate? A very fundamental question was in my head. Why do human beings fight so much when we can collaborate and grow together,
Right,
right?
right.
And there's many answers to this, of course, but I wanted to study it formally. So when I received opportunities to do so, to actually study it I'd read books and stuff, but I wanted to learn from experts. I wanted to really, and then the reason for learning that was to figure out, is there something I can do to, because somebody had asked me this when I was growing up, when I was writing these poems on war and conflict and things. Someone had asked me, Sudeep, you write a lot about war. You write these anti-war poems, poems on conflict and the misery of it all. But what good is it doing? You're not a soldier. You have not experienced war. Okay, you'll write 10 poems. You'll write 100 poems. You'll write 200 poems. You'll write a book maybe someday on conflict. Is it really going to end a war? Is it really going to do something? And that question really impacted me a lot. Started thinking, yeah, maybe, yeah, I'm not going to stop writing for sure. But then, is there something I could be doing to address these issues in a more concrete, constructive manner? Which eventually led me to conflict as an area that I really wanted to study about. And while I'll tell you right now that as we'll get to this point in the podcast where listeners will discover and understand that, hey, I'm not really doing anything in conflict or disaster management right now. So what happened to all that? But it continues to play a very important role in my life. I'm able to perceive the world in a much different way than I did prior to my studies in the field. I'm able to, and being able to perceive the world also helps you understand human nature in some ways, which helps you become a better communicator in some ways, which eventually ties into the work that you do as a content creator, a content marketer, and even as a teacher. So it's all interconnected. Douglas Adams, one of my favorite writers, he wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and a bunch of other books. He wrote this book called the fundamental interconnectedness of everything. It's a Dirk
I've heard
Gently
that. Yeah,
holistic detective book, I think. And then he talks about this theory where and quantum physicists also talk about it, right? String theory, everything's
yeah.
connected, quantum entanglement. I strongly believe in that, right? I believe that nothing you do goes waste, right? You might learn a lesson when you're 6 years old, and it might not come in handy until you're 35. You might learn something at 35 that may not really show you its value, manifest its value in your life until you're 90. So I don't believe anything that you learn ever goes to waste. And this belief of mine, I'll talk about it more later, also ties into the methodology I adopt when I teach anything in life.
Right. Got it, Sudeep. Sudeep, just another question before I move on. You said, you happen to, stumble upon Teach for India, and then, you were put in one of the most difficult places. And, you've had your experience, and you said it was a 2-year fellowship, but you did about 7 or 8 months, and then,
Yeah.
you moved on from that. Did that have to do with the tough experiences that you had to undergo at Chembur, or is it more complicated and should we move on from that?
So I'll keep it short.
Right.
So the short answer, there's a long answer, there's a short answer. The short version of the answer is yes, it did have something to do with it. Um, See, there's something about, I'll be honest, there's something about pay equity that bothers me a lot, right?
Okay.
Teachers are not, and I say this very shamelessly and without any authority to back me, teachers are not paid enough, right? I can't show you statistics, I can't, because I
You
don't
don't
have
need
those.
to. No,
But
it's
teachers
pretty
are not
evident out
paid
there. Yeah,
enough
anybody with common sense will realize that teachers are not
They
paid
really
enough.
aren't. They really aren't. And that might have been a very small reason at that time, which is not really the organization's fault, because they do tell you, hey, it's going to be a stipend, we'll pay you this much. But then I think it showed me a lot about, because the approach I brought was very different from being a conventional, you have to learn your curriculum, you have to prepare for your exams, you have to score high marks, right? And that was the typical approach, as it should be in a school, as it is, not should be, but as it is in a school,
Right.
in a conventional school. I decided to do something different, which didn't really go down well with the way things were
Ah,
structured.
right. Got it.
To be honest, I think the simplest answer is that Teach for India and I were not a culture fit for each other at that point.
Got it.
So unfortunately I realized this and wasted the program's time for 7 months. But I'm very grateful to have been a part of it, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I think anything that is, that results in somebody parting ways immaturely is way bigger learning than somebody going on with it
Yeah,
and completing it and all that. Because I think being part of an incident that helps you understand what not to do and how not to do something is way bigger lesson, because it just helps you avoid so many more. Uh, you're just saving that much more time by wasting just
yes,
that much amount of time. So that's
absolutely,
the thing, and
absolutely.
I'm pretty surprised that because I've spoken to, I think, a couple of people before this who've been part of Teach for India, and I mean, I'm pretty surprised that they it didn't go down well. Some of the experiments that you had to do, because in the first place, it's not a conventional place to teach,
I can
and
also tell you this, Jagmohan, that I was in Teach for India in their 13-15 cohort, 2013-15 cohort.
right.
Uh, since then, I have also met a lot of fellows, and I can definitely tell you this: the approach at Teach for India has evolved a lot,
Hmm.
uh, as it would be for any organization, right?
Right.
So, as I said, I think it boils down to the organization and I not being a culture fit at that particular point in time. Some things I think are also very temporal in nature, right? It's not, sometimes you can be a great asset to a company like Google, hypothetically. Maybe I will be a great asset to Google, but in 2037, right?
Right. Right.
Not in 2024.
Yeah.
But I don't know that yet.
Right.
Or an organization that I've worked with in the past where I felt, hey, I didn't really gel well. Who knows? If I come across them again and if there's an opportunity with them, maybe I'll find that that's the best place I've ever worked at,
Right.
right? So too with Teach for India, I guess for me at that point, there were certain things that I wanted to try out, which in their scheme of things, in their because any organization has certain objectives, right?
Yeah.
That they have to meet and achieve targets. So, and I also feel I was very young at that time, and I was one of those krantikari type of people. I'm like, मैं बदलाव लाऊंगा system में. The idea system सीख तो पहले मेरे भाई. So I do not assign even a percentage of what happened in terms of my departure. I would not attribute it to any negative experience I had while at the org, or them not being willing to experiment or anything. I'm sure they would have been willing to had I also cooperated with them in certain other ways, which I'll be very honest, I did not at that point.
Right. No, got it, Sudeep. The reason I wanted to touch upon that was just to normalize people quitting in between, or for whatever reasons. It doesn't matter why, what, where.
Yeah,
It's normal. So that's simply
absolutely,
why
absolutely,
I just
absolutely.
wanted to touch upon it, and it doesn't make anything any different anymore. It's
But can I
just
tell
that
you something, Jagmohan? Can I tell
yeah,
you something very interesting?
please.
The kids I taught over there,
Uh-huh.
I thought I'd never meet them again.
Okay,
And this is a story that makes me emotional even today.
okay,
In 2000, between 17 and 19, I started getting invites to judge these college festivals.
okay.
Because I had kind of blown up on the poetry, the spoken word poetry scene at
Right,
that
right,
time. So I
right.
started getting these invites. Our mutual friend Zohib has been a part of these events as well. So
Okay,
um, at one of these events at Sophia College in Mumbai, no, I believe it was a spoken word poetry that I was competition that I was judging, and I was sitting all the way in the back, right? So imagine an amphitheater style seating arrangement, but inside it, it's a proper auditorium. It's those cascaded seats. I'm sitting somewhere at the top, and I can see the people in front of me. They're tiny, right? Because they're down there,
right,
and then but I can hear them clearly, and there's these screens, and then the competition gets over, and then the host comes and says, there's one more thing that's left. It's not part of the competition, but we hope you'll stay to watch this as well. And then it's one young girl, one young boy, another young girl, another young boy, they come on stage and they start performing spoken word poetry, and I get told that their students, and something very, very, very familiar about them, but I can't put my finger on it. I'm getting goosebumps as I tell you the story
Right.
because I'm playing it out in my head right now, and I'm still not very impressive. I clap and everything, and I'm with the students after that, and I see these kids walk towards me, and it's like there's a if you've seen Oppenheimer, right, or any one of these movies or videos that depict nuclear fission, you see that there's this tiny spark. And then that spark becomes two sparks, three sparks, four sparks, and then a ball forms, and then so it's like realizations happening. One step closer towards me, one spark. Another step, another person takes a step, second spark. Then they come to me, "Sir, you remember us?" And all I remember saying is, "No, no, 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 no. It's not you guys. It's not you." I was in denial in front of them.
Right. Right.
Some of my students had become spoken word poets, and they remembered me, and they didn't have to say this, but they said it. They said, "We love the way you taught us, and you inspired us to actually be creative rather than just learn." So something that might not have worked out as a culture fit for me in the organization actually made an impact on the students,
Yeah.
some if not all. And they remembered me. They came out to me. They're like, "Thank you for helping us, inspiring us get to where we are today." And Jagmohan, if there's one reason you need to be a teacher, no, it's moments like this, right? मतलब कुछ नहीं और चाहिए. And in moments like this, I talk about pay equity and this and that, but you know, honestly,
These
in
this
moments like
trumps
this,
everything else.
yeah, it just, oh my god, I'm being very inarticulate about this because it's a very emotional thing for me, right? I never expected I'd ever see them again, but then I did, and they made me want to be a better teacher too. And I thank them in my head at least, and on Instagram I'm connected with some of them. uh, I you know I thank them as well for my journey as a teacher even today.
I share pretty much the same sort of sentiments about teaching, Sudeep, because I think if you have to see in terms of an absolute ROI or intangible ROI, it's the highest impact job on this planet, like hands down, because a teacher is much, I think it's way bigger than whatever they're being portrayed today as, because a teacher is someone who is influencing knowingly or unknowingly a bunch of students for more than one third of a single day. That is every passing, every working day, more than the parents, more than anybody else. Teachers are the ones that are in front of the students, and which is why for me, sending kids to school or not even today is a big debate in my head. Because boss, if you come to realize it, you are so careful about everything that your kid wants and meets and does, but how much really are you thinking about the school that you send your kid to? And the funnier thing is, we just look at the school, we don't look at the teachers individually. Do you go meet all the teachers individually? If you really care that much, according to me, you need to meet every single teacher that's going to be spending a certain number of hours in an entire year, right? Because they are the ones who make or break your child's life. And look, now it doesn't matter who studied in the Doon school or some school, big international school, but somebody who was in some school in Chembur, it's because of one individual who happened to be there. It doesn't matter which school they were a part of, which area they were a part of, who were the kids around them. But, this, it's not like it's not unknown, but I just can't stop talking about this aspect. Like
Absolutely,
anytime I
no,
get
no.
a chance, I'll just go on and on about this.
I think, and I'm sure I'd love to catch up with you more about this because, I've had these thoughts as well, right? Which, what you said just sparked off another thought in my head about the inequity of access, right? Who gets to access what level of education and what outcome and impact does that yield? That's I'm sure that's a topic for a whole other podcast. So I won't really.
Totally, yeah.
We'll catch up separately and have a conversation on this. But yeah, absolutely, you're right. When you say that it's one individual sometimes that makes that impact, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's this teacher I had, right, who I'd like to talk about. A few teachers. One was my Shantapati teacher in my school, who encouraged me to write and saved me from the wrath of other teachers who He said that why is this kid so dumb, failing at science and maths and Marathi and this and that. There was this teacher at Prithvi Theatre. So I studied at Prithvi Theatre. I trained in theatre for quite some years. Um, Her name is Bubla Basu. She did a course at Prithvi Theatre called Everything, Write About It. WRITE. So,
Right.
and then it was a 1 month course that I did with her with a bunch of other people, and she did this thing which I really liked. She made us create a folder on day one, right? A normal folder, and then we had to draw or paint or whatever on it the following words. We had to interpret the way we wanted to these following words. It said, "You are now entering the human heart," and then she taught us this quote which I live my life by, and I encourage all my students to this day to read more about this and to understand this quote and its true meaning, its essence. The quote is, it's by William Blake, poet. You know, the guy who wrote Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright, that guy, William Blake. He said, and I quote, "I must create a system or else be enslaved by another man's. I will not reason or compare. My business is to create." So I teach my students this, and you need to create a system of your own, especially as a teacher. It's very important to have that one, a style, a technique, something that sets you apart from the other teachers. Not to compete, but in order to ensure that all your students are hooked on your every word to the extent possible. And why it's not so much for ego, it's more about if you're able to impart your learning in an effective manner, that impact that you spoke about, that singular person making impact, the probability of that goes up.
Yeah.
So that's my entire goal, man. Like if there's one thing I want to do with anything I teach, I want someone to be able to take one lesson from it, something that they'll always remember, something that they'll always do after that, right? And I've been fortunate enough that in every batch I've ever taught, whether it's right from IS officers to school students who I'm teaching right now, uh, there's someone who comes back to me at some point and tells me, "Hey, I remember this. This stuck with me." I got a message on Instagram the other day about my Holocaust poetry and conversations I've had with a batchmate of mine at that time, and she wrote back to me, very kind of her, saying, I remember the impact our conversations had about philosophy and war and conflict. And at the end of the day, isn't that all really that you want your legacy to be? You want to be, what do you leave behind in this world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're able to touch one life, impact one life, I'm saying one. Of course, the goal is to impact more, but even if you do that, right, I think it's all worth it.
No, totally. I can't agree with you more on this aspect. This is how I take away, right? Whatever you said, this is how I'd rather interpret, or this is my version of it. Is that you said a teacher or anybody who's trying to impart or give something out needs to have a system, and this is why I think that is. Obviously, it's not a as a teacher. First of all, in a class of, let's say, 50 students or 100 students, you're not going to be liked by everybody. Your job is not to be also liked by everybody. That's not going to work. And your methods are not going to work for everybody. But you got to stay true to your methods consistently, because it is a game of probability at the end of the day. It is not for anything, but you keep doing what you do, because the person who will have to receive it, you don't know where and how they come from, but you just can't give up on your thing,
Agreed.
because it will work. It may not work when you want, but it will work, and you just have to stick to it, because the moment you change from system to system, you're making it more difficult for the probability to work. So, and it's not
Absolutely.
going to be easy for you also, right?
Correct.
Because so yeah, totally can't agree more on that. But
Awesome.
yeah, we will definitely
Catch
continue
up
this
more on this.
conversation on another forum or a platform. Coming back to we spoke about aspects of your career, or your journey, writing poetry. Now tell me, how did the translation from these two passionate things, rather, writing and poetry, which was a passion, which didn't have a specific objective or a goal from a monetary point of view. How did you manage to convert that into a livelihood, Sudeep?
Thanks. I get asked this a lot, to be honest. In seminars and workshops and sessions on content marketing that I do. And the answer is actually, you know, it's simpler than I think you might even like it to be.
I hate that actually. Most of the times, some of the deepest thing that I'm asking when I'm waiting is just like a
It's just,
synoptic.
yeah,
Oh,
no,
okay,
but I'll tell you, there's no rocket science behind it.
right,
It's actually quite simple. In fact, I would say I'll start with the fundamentals, right? Before I get down into the specifics. If there's something you're passionate about, it's going to be much easier for you to convert it into an income generating source than if you did something that you're not passionate about, right? I think it's very simple. It's as simple as um, food, right? So people tell you eat healthy food. I will eat healthy food and be fit if it's tasty. No, you offer me taste food that's not tasty. The less tasty it gets, the harder it is for me to keep eating that to be healthy. But you offer me
absolutely,
delicious healthy food. Why will I say no? I'll be
right,
healthy and I'll eat well,
right,
right? So I think number one, if you are good at something, you can definitely consider that to become a stream of income down the road, which is what I did. Um, Writing has always been a part of every single thing that I have done, professionally also. So, with my first job in Haryana, I was writing reports, I was building case studies, I was creating training modules, which involves a certain creative approach as well. Um, I then teach for India, right? If you're honestly, if you're not creative, I believe you can't be a teacher, right? Because I said if you have to hold the attention of 60 students, and by the way, there were not 60 there. I think there were 120 students that I was teaching at one time.
right.
So that's a lot, right? So two classes, 60 and 60, but the seventh standard, we call them the winners and the achievers. 60, 70 at one time. And these kids come from broken families, they come from abusive backgrounds. uh, it's hard to hold their attention, man. You have to get creative, right?
They have bigger problems in life than listen to some guy
Yeah,
talking
so why would they
some
listen to you?
privileged thing. Yeah,
Why would they care? So you have to make it
exactly.
worth their while,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? You
And
have to
this is
make
the
it
Teach
worth
for India
their
experience that you're Teach
This
for
is a
India
teach for India
experience.
experience, yeah. So you have to make it worth their while, right?
Right, right,
And then from there to I worked for a non-profit for a while. There also I was, I was teaching a course over there called CII, inclusive education. So I was mixing disaster management and disability studies, and doing a mishmash of it, and teaching students from 16 countries across Asia, Europe, and other places. Not Europe, sorry, Asia, mostly Asia and Eastern Europe, I think. Uh, so I don't want to take you down every single thing that I've done and how writing played a role in it, but the point is that writing's always been a part of it, right?
right.
Now, when was I able to actually realize that it's not just about disaster management in writing? It's not just about non-profit work and writing. It's not just about teaching and writing. Can writing itself be a profession? Yes. That realization started to come after 2017 when I entered the startup ecosystem in Bangalore. So I moved to Bangalore in 2017,
Okay,
right? And I moved here as head of content and subsequently head of communications at a startup called Your Quote, which was an Instagram for writers, an Instagram like app for writers at that time. Um, that's when I truly realized that it's 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 important for you to have confidence and faith in your abilities enough to put yourself out there and say, boss, I deserve to be paid for this, right? I think a lot of writers, they come from a place of hesitation and self-doubt. You must have heard this term imposter syndrome, right?
Yes, oh, very much. Yeah.
The term imposter syndrome is synonymous with writers, with creative people. You find me one creative person at the start of their career who says, "Hey, I'm confident, I know I'm good, and I will give you $1 million right now." I don't have those $1 million on me, but I will earn those and give them to you. Right? So I think having that confidence, I don't know whether you'll want to include this in your podcast, this particular line I'm about to say, but I read this on a t-shirt, this t-shirt wisdom, t-shirt gyan. If you can't dazzle them with, if you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, baffle them with your bullshit. Right? It works.
It does.
It
It
works so
does.
well.
That's the funny part.
It works so well. Jagmohan, half the things I'm telling you right now, I've not prepared for.
Right.
Right? The moments I feel I cannot dazzle you with my brilliance, I'm trying to baffle you with my bullshit. Everyone does it.
Of
But
course. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing is, as a writer, how well do you do it? What is advertising? What's advertising? Are you really telling me that biscuit is going to change your life? But if I can convince not the end audience, but if I can convince my organization which is funding that ad, if I can convince the client that I will write these lines that will convince your end audience, your customers, that this biscuit will change their lives, job done. Right? So I don't use bullshit here as a pejorative term at all. I use it as a tool.
A
Right?
tool.
What is bullshit at the
Absolutely.
end of the day?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's manure. Bullshit is what? Manure. Right? What does manure do? Manure is a catalyst for growth. You see how effectively I'm bullshitting right now and convincing you that bullshit is actually something of value. So my point is
In my
here that
head, bullshit is emotion.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Emotion can be played and twisted and turned in any 100 million ways. So,
Anything, right? So if you're confident is my point, right? If you are able to sell your creativity with confidence, uh, at some point someone went to a Steven Spielberg and pitched him a film.
right.
Someone went to a young George Lucas went to producers for money to create Star Wars, right? Star Wars is just a bunch of men and women in the galaxy with laser swords running around hitting each other with it using something called the force, which no one can see or feel or touch, but you can draw objects. It's imagination, right? If you're able to sell a story effectively, that story can be anything. The story can be about you. That story can be about your work. The story can be about outcomes. The story can be about more money, and the story can be about stories as well.
Right.
Right? So, storytelling is the art that I'm really talking about here. If you're able to tell a story effectively, right, then I think as a creative individual, success is inbound or success is all but guaranteed at some point in your career. So that's where I came from, right? I always see myself as a storyteller. When I realized that, hey, I don't just need to tack on storytelling as an add-on to what I'm doing, but storytelling in itself can be a profession and earn me money. That's when I decided that okay, why don't I do this full time? And that's my transition really from a social sciences student to a government officer to a school teacher to a non-profit professional to a corporate employee working in private wealth management to eventually someone who worked hard in hardcore marketing, who worked in hardcore communications within marketing and so on.
Got it. Got it, Sudeep. Makes total sense in terms of the way, especially the way you said it's one thing about your writing syncing with the end audience, but it's another thing to kind of make that sellable to the stakeholders in the company that you're working for, and that following through with the audience as well. But what happens after that, it's another thing. But I'm going to come back and touch upon this, go deeper into this aspect a little bit, because you've been not just in the creative solutions space, but you've also seemed to head departments or whatever it is. So I want to understand how in companies and startups, from whatever your experience, how the hierarchy or process works, I'll tell you who are the listeners for this particular question, right? The listeners to this question are young, aspiring marketing professionals, young, aspiring writers, but who want to also be in the corporate world. And there are people who are interested in filmmaking and becoming popular like that. But there are a whole lot of people out there who are mad about these Zomato notification lines, Swiggy notification lines, and these startups, the way how creative they are, like Cred. So they talk about that like the way movie buffs talk about some of their favorite films. So my question is this: how does a creative solutions team in corporates or startups work? If you can give an overview so that they can figure it out. Okay, this is what it works. This is what I need to do. Stuff like that.
Okay, so
And on the way, please feel free to break myths.
sure. Number one, marketing is not a fun field to work in. A lot of people who do their, who study arts, who study, they go to MICA, right? It's fun to study, right? I've not studied it myself, but from what I hear, it's fun to study. But working in marketing is as enjoyable slash non-enjoyable as working in finance, as working in legal, as working in anything really, right? So if you're coming in with the idea that hey, I'm going to have fun and I'm going to chill and for example, if you watched 10 episodes of Mad Men and I'm like, bro, I'll become an advertiser tomorrow, bro. No, that's you need to there's nothing really that you can watch to prepare you for marketing. Also, marketing, advertising, kind of different, right? It's not a lot of people like A&M publications, advertising, marketing. Um, there's a lot more to marketing than just advertising, by the way, right? So for anyone who thinks, I'm going to be in marketing, but I'm just going to do advertising, yes, you can if you specialize in that and that's what you choose to really pursue. But if you want to grow in the field of marketing, as let's say you're thinking of a career trajectory as you know uh, an intern, maybe you start as an intern with a brand, say Britannia, right? So you start with Britannia or wherever. You join the brand team, right? You join the marketing team. Abhi marketing में there's so many different things you can do. You can be in brand marketing, right? Define the brand identity, um, work on the brand language, the tone of voice, and so many other things. You can join the creative and design team, which is often ancillary. No, not ancillary. It's it's with marketing, but it's not quite marketing itself. So the creative and design team in the company, for example, you could be a copywriter with them assigned to marketing. So a marketing copywriter, but then you could choose to work in product marketing, which is very different, right? You could choose to work in marketing analytics, which is very different. You could choose to work in content marketing, which is very different from product marketing, for example. Um, you could choose to work in corporate marketing, which is very different from. There are overlaps, but each of these has its own specializations, has its own burdens and its advantages, and you need to be able to understand all that if you want to see yourself grow, say from a brand manager, hypothetically from a manager to a senior manager to a head of department to a director, eventually rising all the way up in the ranks to chief marketing officer, CMO, right? So it's not all fun and games. There's a lot of hard work you need to. So when I came in right into marketing, I'm like, oh great, I'm a creative guy, marketing is going to be a breeze for me. It took me a long time, but I realized, hey, you need some maths, right? uh, More than maths you need logic, yes, but knowing some maths is great because there's so many numbers involved. There's your cost per click, there's your cost per mile, and you need to be able to do these calculations on the fly. So, and then again, it depends on whether you're on the client side or the agency side, for example, right? So let's say you join a marketing agency where you have clients who are your corporates, right? Even then you need to know, because you're in the meeting and someone asks you, hey, this idea is great, show me the ROI now. Now, there are other people in the team who are expected to do that, but if the question is directed towards you and you're able to answer,
Right.
that's so much better for you and your growth as a professional in that field. Now, if you're on the client side, conversely, and you're talking to someone from the agency, right? The agency is trying to put you on their thing. They'll tell you whatever they have to. They'll do their storytelling to convince you. You then have to be very vigilant and careful, and you have to then look for ROI, and you have to, challenge them on the smallest things. So that whole this thing about agency versus client, right? This
Yes,
whole,
yes.
yeah. But it's true. It's there, right, for a reason. An agency's job is basically to earn money by pitching to clients, convincing them that, hey, what we are doing for you is going to work. Whereas a client's job is to work with agencies to make it work, but then the way you an agency will never be able to understand your true ROI
Right,
requirements
right.
as well as you can, or someone from your org can, right? So I think, to break a myth, number one, it's not just fun and games. It's a very, very serious profession. So think a lot about whether you truly want to be in this. Second, I would say, talking about growth, right? It's very, very important in this day and age to upskill, to keep upskilling. It's not enough to just do one course. I have not done any course. I've done my BA in English Lit. I have then done my MA in disaster management, and I don't have any LinkedIn certifications at this point in time. But I've grown in the field of marketing. How? By learning on the job. But for younger people entering right now, I've seen an easier way for them to grow faster within an organization is to upskill and do it fast, right? So there's so many courses available. There's so many edtech platforms out there which people can avail of, right? And I think it's very, very important for a marketer these days to be a prompt engineer.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the basics, at least, of prompt engineering, you, my friend, are screwed, right? Because there will be someone out there who will. AI is not this, Terminator, Skynet like AI who's going to come and shoot you and take over. But AI is this very subtle thing that's going to creep in and be there. Now, someone who knows how to
Use it.
write that wave, use it effectively, is definitely going to be at an advantage compared to you. So I would say that if you're in marketing these days, um, any role, it doesn't matter which role, starter, fresher, midway through your journey, senior role, learn prompt engineering. I think that is absolutely, absolutely critical. That's another thing. The third thing, uh, and this is something that people don't very often talk about, but I want to touch upon it. uh, there is a lot of mental health focus these days, right? But you will find there are moments and there are times when marketing can be as challenging as the toughest of any other profession, right? We talk about coders, we talk about analysts, we talk about burnout. We don't really talk about marketing professionals that much. But I, having been in this field for a while, have seen cases of burnout, right? It's very easy because it creeps up on you. You don't even realize. See, your head's a machine like any other machine, right? Whether you're coding or whether you're thinking up strategies to, you know, maximize your return on investment on that marketing campaign that you're running. If you overheat that machine, it's going to shut down. It's going to burn out. So I think marketing professionals, especially younger ones, need to be very cautious and very wary and aware of the pitfalls of a meteoric rise, right? You'll often find someone, you'll, okay, 2 years of experience from account manager to senior account manager to brand manager to this. But the toll it takes on you, right, is very, very intense.
Right.
I mean, you see this. Honestly, man, this was not me when I first moved to Bangalore, right? But it catches up with you. And I'm trying to now, after 7 years in Bangalore, cool down a little, try to, refocus my attitude in a way that's more sustainable. I think sustainability is key to surviving
Yeah.
in marketing. So sustained efforts are not going to help as much as sustainable efforts. So these are some insights. I don't know whether they were very helpful, but
No, no, no. Totally. I mean, just see, sometimes, Sudeep, it's not about what you say, it's about how many times you hear it from people and how many people say it. Simple things, right? What I've realized, if one simple thing that people find it very boring or it's the same, but if 100 people say it, it suddenly makes a difference. And yeah, so everybody saying the same thing, according to me, it makes a huge difference, because that is so much more validation. And if it can help someone from learning from these others mistakes, I think that's the whole thing, right? That's the smart way to be. And if somebody is telling, boss, mental health is a thing, and sustainable living is a thing, but because in your 20s you feel like you're a superman, you're a superhuman being, you can do anything, your ambitions are there and everything. But I'm not expecting everybody who's listening to you to kind of internalize this. But
Hmm.
even if a few people kind of get it, I think it makes a difference. So that's where
Absolutely.
I'm coming from. And so probably one another sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, no, I just thought maybe I add one more small thing of value.
Please.
So I just want to give you an example of how difficult it is these days to stand out, right? So especially as a creative professional. So if you are a creative professional listening to this, my one advice to you would be figure out a good way to stand out, right? There are recruiters who get thousands of CVs per day. They're using AI right now to filter out CVs, right? So if you're just creating a LinkedIn CV and exporting it as a PDF, you're lost. You've lost the game right there, right? Uh, I'll give you an example of what I did once, some years ago. I Someone asked me. They said, "Okay, so we want to hire for this role." I said, "See, the thing is that I know I can do this role that you're offering me, but I feel I can do so much more. So why don't you offer me a bigger role, a bigger piece of the pie, both in terms of responsibilities and compensation?" To which I was told, "Okay, prove yourself. Convince us that we should be giving you these additional responsibilities and increased compensation." I said, "Okay, give me 2 days." I went and I thought, how do I impress him? How do I impress him? What do I do? I said, okay. So what I did was I created a menu card as you would get at a fine dine restaurant. And I made my experiences into 3 courses: first course, second course, and dessert. I had, reviews on page one, a fake review from Gordon Ramsay. So Gordon Ramsay has this quote: "What are you, an idiot sandwich?" So the first quote was, "What is Sudeep? A genius sandwich." Then something funny like, "Sudeep's seventh grade English teacher has potential, can do better. Please see me after class." So, spark, throw some humor in there, sprinkle some humor, make people want to listen to you, right?
Right.
And I think that's a lesson for marketing as well. If you are able to create a campaign that stands out from the noise. So there's an agency called Moonshot. Devaya Bopanna, Tanmay Bhatt from All India Bakchod and all those
Right, right,
others.
right.
They
Yeah,
create these ads. You might have. They work with Cred. They work with
yeah,
other
yeah.
organizations to create these. Indira Nagar ka Gunda,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Remember that? Everyone's talking about that even today. Why? There's this thing called incongruence in marketing, right?
Okay.
So incongruence is very, very important. If you want people to actually sit up and pay attention, people are expecting to see a particular pattern. एक आदमी आएगा, एक प्रोडक्ट बेचेगा और उसका ब्रांड लोगो आएगा. If you break that mold, if you break that pattern, people sit up and pay attention, right?
Hmm.
So as with selling yourself, so too with selling your campaigns. Which brings me back to my original point. It's all about storytelling. And the better you are about storytelling, at storytelling, the easier it is for you to build your career, to progress in that trajectory faster, and to succeed by giving your organization more ROI because they've invested in you. So if you bring that element, that OMG element of incongruence to the table, I think that really helps you stand apart in every single thing you do.
Right. No, this is a great thing. That menu idea that you did, I hope it impressed them and it led.
It did, it did, it
It,
did.
you okay? Got it. You met
Not
your
only, not only that. Someone saw that and someone's like, "Hey, this is great. Do you want to conduct a CV writing workshop?" So for the next 3 months, I earned at least 40% of my salary. In addition to my salary, 40% of my salary. In addition to that, by side gigging as a CV writing professional. So I'm saying these things lead to one another, right? All it takes is for you to get noticed. You
right.
remember that guy who sang Kacha Badam
Kacha
during
badam.
COVID?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, one thing that you do, right? Incongruence. Once again, I'm
Right.
hammering down on that point. If you are able to break the mold, so I had this theater professor once called Neeraj Kabi. Neeraj Kabi, you might have seen him in, he does TV right now. Taj
Yeah.
Mahal 1987.
Is he the one that acted in this movie Ship of Theseus?
Yes, yes, he's the one. He's the Jain monk. Yes.
He's the
So I had
monk,
to,
right? He
yes, yes,
refuses this medicine and then eventually, right, right, right. Got it.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had the good fortune to train under him
Wow. Okay.
in his theater group called Prava back in Mumbai, and we did some plays together at Prithvi Theatre and some other places. So I remember this one thing that he taught me. So we'd have these discussions, right? So the cast would be there, the team would be there, and then after rehearsals, we just sit and just talk. So he'd tell us, there's a chandelier. Right now, in that chandelier, it's a beautiful grand hall, right? It's a 1,000 piece chandelier. Every crystal meticulously designed by Swarovski, to the finest standards of crystal engineering. And you go in there, you're like, wow, right? Now, there is one crystal that's slightly out of alignment. The 10,000 people who go into that auditorium will look up, say wow, but will remember that one piece that's slightly out of alignment. Now, he had explained it in a way because he told us that, hey, this is why you need to be perfect on stage. This is why, if you're messing up lines, because you're like, "Hey, the show went well. Why you bothered so much?" He's like, no, if there's one thing, then people pay attention to that. So I took that lesson, but I also modified it for my own purpose. I'm like, what if that incongruence of that, right? The thing that stands out in a negative way can be made to stand out in a positive way.
Positive way. Right. Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, so I took all these lessons and I think it's really served me well through my journey as a writer, as a teacher, as a marketing professional. So my biggest takeaway for anyone listening to this would be, I hope your biggest takeaway if you're listening to this would be incongruence in selling yourself, incongruence in developing yourself, right? Don't be afraid to take those big bets that if everyone is doing this thing, I will also just follow the herd and do this. If there's something unique, something different that you think you can excel in, go for it, right? You never know how big that might potentially get a few years, a few months down the road. Incongruence in your work, you're doing a fantastic job, but you're getting meets expectations on your appraisal, right?
Right.
Do that one thing that makes you stand out, right? And I remember in one of my jobs during my farewell, people kept talking about me, but they weren't talking about my work. Most other people, they get, so people who had left before me, great work, wonderful colleague, loved your work ethic. When it came to me, no one spoke about my work ethic. No one spoke about my, mm, you know, my writing or whatever. You're a very creative guy. Oh, we'll always remember those songs you made. I stood out over there through incongruence. I think this podcast should be called Incongruence now, man.
No, I was the moment you said about it. I think of a title for every podcast, right? Or a real card or a starting card or whatever it is. I was just thinking, okay, you know what? Incongruence is what it's going to be because where it made it more interesting was the fact that when you said the chandelier had 1,000 piece crystal, but then one stood out. And see, as marketers, I think everybody are fighting for attention and first figure out a way, no matter good or bad, figure out a way to get attention and then modify it, do whatever it is to suit your narrative. So I think incongruence fits very well. And going back to the great idea now, that ad, that Indranagar Ka Gunda thing, I think it did its job at the end of the day. And which brings me to this point, Sudeep, when it comes to marketing, right? Now, I've been in sales for most part of my life. That's kind of you know, where I've, done most of my work. And sales is quantified in a very black and white way. There's no two ways to it. But I've always wondered how marketing, because I understand there are marketing, there is B2B marketing, there is B2C marketing. I understand B2C marketing is more easily quantifiable than B2B and all that. But in general, if you can, from your experience, how do they measure a marketer's success? And as much as what people organically may think is success for them, what do you think they need to also keep in mind as to what their employers think is what they need to be measured by? If you can, point a couple of things, whatever, a little bit, I think that'll be very helpful.
I think that's a very insightful question, Jagmohan, and I'll try my best to answer it. So, while of course you have your KRAs, right? Any organization will make you have a KRA.
Yeah.
Will tell you that these are certain things that you need to achieve targets. This target can look like I need to increase followers on my LinkedIn page from 50,000 to 80,000 in Q1 2024. Something as simple as that. Two, I want to build affinity for my product amongst a community of youth in central India in a Hindi speaking belt, while my product is primarily targeted at a South Indian audience. Something as complex as that.
Right.
Where the measurables become a little more complex, how do you? So then you need to take a sample set, you need to put certain numbers in place. Numbers are key, right? Because at the end of the day, an organization, for them to track your growth, they're going to track you on numbers. I mean, there are certain unquantifiables also that they'll track you on, but the main thing is numbers. So first and foremost, figure out how to get all of your targets, all of your goals into numbers. Something that the organization can count, measure, and you can show tangible growth in. Right? It also helps you because if you see that you're doing something for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and the numbers aren't increasing the way you want them to, then you also know that hey, it's not worth my time, my effort to keep pursuing this. Right? So numbers are super important. The other thing I think that is important for marketers to consider when they are being evaluated to really understand how they are perceived in an organization. Now, the truth is, the unfortunate truth, but a truth nonetheless, is that when the bad times fall, the first teams to be impacted are marketing,
Right.
right? See, marketing is a luxury, not a necessity in any company.
Yeah.
Marketing can become a necessity at some point, but it's when the chips are down, when the monies are low, marketing becomes a luxury, right?
Yes.
So you have to figure out ways to be of value. So I would strongly suggest you diversify. What I mean by this is it's good to have skills of a generalist but be known as a specialist, right? So if people see that hey, you're great at this but you also can do these other things, when the chips are down, your value increases.
Right.
So for example, if I'm only a product marketer and I don't know jack about content marketing, or if I'm only a marketing analyst and I don't know anything about you know client outreach, for example, right? Um, if I'm in an agency, I'm crunching the numbers, running the numbers, but I also might need to know how to speak to clients, engage with them, convince clients, or sell them a story. So being a generalist at that sense is very useful, especially in these times. But you should build a reputation for yourself as a specialist. So in the good times, you're remembered, and then your value increases commensurately,
Right.
right? The other thing I would say is you need to make sure that you uh, follow through. See, a lot of people are great, and this is a mistake that I have made many times in my career, and I've learned from the hard way. There's a lot of people who are all talk and not much do, right? I will make you a promise. So don't make promises that your actions can't follow through with, right? And there's this term, right? A lot of people use over under promise and
Over deliver.
over deliver. So under commit. So under commit and over deliver is what they say. I strongly believe in that. So don't. promise someone the world, because it's very tempting, no, to say that, hey, my campaign will do this, it'll change the world. No, manage expectations over there, but keep working behind the scenes to make sure that it exceeds expectations,
Right.
right? In a manner that surprises pleasantly the people who are assigned to evaluate you and your progress and your performance over time in an organization, so that they know you are someone key. So if Sudeep says he'll do something, I automatically expect 10 times more. Rather than if Sudeep says something, he'll do something, it sounds grand, but I don't expect much to come out of it. And I've made that mistake many times, right? I've made these grandiose promises. And I think that's the biggest thing that happens, especially with marketers, because you want to sell a dream. So the thing about a story, right? We talked about storytelling earlier, remember?
Yes.
The thing about telling a good story is this: that story can be as fantastic as possible, but there's a line that comes, a point that comes where it crosses beyond from being just fantastic to completely unbelievable, right? So unrelatable also.
Right.
Lord of the Rings worked so well because it was grounded in elements of reality. Harry Potter worked very well because it was about a student's experience, right? At the end of the day, it wasn't just about magical wizards living in a forest who fought some evil demon, right? So there's any good storytelling has to have elements of reality. So when you're telling a story in terms of committing something also,
Right.
right? Ground it in reality, manage expectations, and if you can, deliver beyond that. So these are my pieces of advice for professionals who are trying to figure out how they can create a system to be evaluated in a manner that will lead to growth over a period of time.
Got it. So brilliant. I mean, the last point, especially you made about managing expectations, is at the end of the day, yes, there are gold standards of work in any industry, but I think what employers are looking for, they are going to judge you not by what you've done versus what's happening in the industry. They're going to judge you by what you promised and what you've delivered, no matter how big or small your promise is, because that's the
Yes.
most basic thing that people are looking for. So why make it difficult for yourself by being super excited, promising too many things, and then it's the worst way to put yourself down. Rather, just promise simple things and then maybe just do your normal thing. Or formula is this: figure out what you're good at, promise one notch lesser than that, and you do your thing anyway. It's the thing. You just stick to it
Absolutely.
and be
Absolutely.
safe. Got it, Sudeep. Thank you very much. Sudeep, I know that the time that we'd set out for this is coming to an end. Do you have a hard stop? Can I take 5, 10 more minutes of your time?
Absolutely.
Okay, great stuff. Because one of the main topics that I wanted to touch upon is still pending, which is can you you do a lot of things already, writing, poetry, and then you use these two to make a living as well, which is amazing. A lot of people's envy. And now you also teach now and then. You've been teaching for 8 years, from what I've known, and irrespective of how often you teach, the fact remains that you've been teaching consistently for 8 years, and you've also spoken about your passion and affinity to teaching and what it means to you being a teacher. So, can you talk about the teaching part of your career, your life, and why are you doing that despite having a lot of other opportunities? What are your plans about it?
So, as we've discussed, we've touched upon some of these points before, where I said that, I had opportunities to teach in the past. Um, I guess what I love about teaching in general is, want the truth.
Yeah, your truths are interesting. Go for it.
Okay. Um, One part of it, and a lot of people won't talk about this, but I love attention, man. I
You're a
love attention.
marketer.
I'm a marketer. More than that, I'm a theater artist.
Yeah,
I'm a
great.
theater kid,
Yeah,
right? So I love being on stage. I love the spotlight on me. I love it shining into my eyes, right? And teaching does that for me, to be honest.
right, right, right.
So it's a very validating thing for me, right? As time consuming, as effort consuming as teaching might be with my day job, always carve time out, right? For opportunities where I can teach, I can train. Um, so 2017 was when I moved to Bangalore, as I told you before, and it's also when I started taking conducting workshops for spoken word poetry. Right, so that was my real foray into training. I said, okay, uh, if I'm doing it every single day of my life, why don't I help others, who want to do this? So I started training people. I started creating modules. When I moved to Bangalore, I got opportunities to do workshops at universities, Christ University, Jain University, bunch of others, SJCC, IIM Bengaluru, Nitya Meenakshi Institute in Yelanka, a bunch of other places. So I started doing that. Then COVID hit. That put an end to my physical classes.
Right.
So I was teaching at that time I had a contract with a startup in Bangalore called Dialogues. So Dialogues Koramangala, Dialogues Indiranagar.
It's the same as
So I
Dialogues
would
Cafe in JP
yeah,
Nagar.
Dialogues Cafe.
They are the
Yes,
okay.
yes, yes,
Great.
yes, yes, yes. So I had this deal with them that you know I would charge a certain fee, which would become like a cover charge for people who attended that. So you get food and drink at the cafe, and then I would get paid a certain percentage of what profits were made from the tickets. Um, but then it stopped, right? So we tried. So then we transitioned to the online model, as did many people during COVID. Um, I struggled with it, to be honest, because the energy that comes through in a physical class is
Yeah.
very different, right? So when I am with my students, I can see who's disengaged and I can turn my focus to them. But if your camera is off on Zoom, if your camera is frozen on Zoom, if there's a grid that you're looking at, rather than being able to turn your head around, move, use the physicality of the space, right? I found that quite difficult. I know I sound like a Luddite right now when I say this, but I prefer physical teaching to digital teaching, right?
You're not
I do.
alone.
I do. As a student, here's the irony. As a student, I prefer digital learning to physical learning. But as a teacher,
I get it.
so so that's how it really began. And I considered it as something that was a hobby, a side pastime, side income. But once again, seeing that I'm able to actually make an impact, having people come back and tell me that, hey, this really helped, being invited again and again to places because the students were asking, is sir coming back next year? Is sir coming back next semester? Right? That really made me start to think about whether I want to keep doing this as a side thing, or is there some possibility that I can actually do this full time. And I'll be honest with you, I am considering a transition in some years. It's not something I can do overnight, right?
Right.
I need to, which is why I'm looking at, despite being the Luddite that I am and saying I prefer physical instruction, in order to make this viable as a full time career, I don't think it's possible if I just do it in the physical space. While I want to continue to do that, which is why I'm now exploring, TalkMate. I'm exploring some other platforms where I can mentor people. I'm exploring platforms where I can upload my own content. Right. So there's Growth School. I've taught with Growth School. I've done a couple of modules with them. I've done a couple of modules with Pepper Content.
Right. Growth School, the Viberg Sisinti thing, that's Growth School, right?
Which one?
Growth School is run by Viberg Sisinti. Is that right?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
confused. Growth School.
It's the
Okay.
one with the green colored logo, man. I've not really looked them up much, but
Cool, cool, cool.
through Pepper Content, I got an opportunity to create a couple of modules for Growth School. So I've
Okay.
done some modules with them. There's a startup called Pencil. I did some sessions with them as well.
Okay.
So I think for anyone looking at exploring training or teaching as a career, whether full time or even part time, I would say that a great place to start is to um, do sessions online, right? and put yourself out there on websites where people can see your portfolio, can get student testimonials, can connect with you one on one to understand what is it that you offer. There was a startup that contacted me about 6 months ago. They wanted me to do a series of workshops for C-level executives on spoken word poetry. So, management through spoken word was the topic that they wanted me to do.
Wow. Okay.
It fell through because of reasons of payment. Um, but I would strongly advise anyone who wants to get started in this to explore startups. Right. So a lot of startups are eagerly looking at people to train, people to conduct offsites, to host offsites, for example, right? What do you do at an offsite? Okay, you have fun, you drink a lot, but then you also learn things. So, what is it
Right.
that you can? How can you add value, right? So, if I'm in marketing, right? So think of unique things like marketing through spoken word is a very unique thing, right? How do you leverage spoken word lessons from spoken word for marketing?
Right.
In an era of self-help gurus, left, right, and center, what's to stop us marketers, trainers, teachers from taking the lessons of success from individuals who've actually done this themselves and using their lessons to add true value to the ecosystem? So I strongly urge anyone who's interested in it to put yourself out there, look at startups, pitch to them relentlessly. For every 100 rejections you get, you will get at least one acceptance. So that is the ratio it takes sometimes to actually succeed in this field. But you need to put yourself out there, keep pitching, and you'll get it. And teaching is like this, man. It's the more you teach, the better you get at it.
Right. Got it, Sudeep. Sudeep, what I'm very delighted about is that usually I have people who are into entrepreneurship in the domain of teaching or knowledge sharing as their full time thing, and talk to them about how they transitioned and stuff like that. But I think here I've sown the seed to have a detailed session, another session with you after you transition, because I've done a pre-transition podcast with you. In this podcast you've shared that in some time to come you're transitioning, probably that's a possibility, into full-time teaching. So this is like documenting the journey in real time. That's how I see this. I'm super excited to see you on the other side and talk to you about how that was after achieving, or after the actual transition. But
Thank you, Jagmohan. No,
it
I
was
just
a
I just wanted
pleasure
to say
talking to
that.
you. Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Sorry, I think cross connections.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Please
please.
go
Yeah.
ahead. Or should I?
No, no. I stopped. You were about to say something.
Yeah, yeah. So, am I still with
I'm
you?
back. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm back. I'm back. I just gone out, gone away
Oh, you're
briefly.
back. Okay, cool. I lost your video feed. Acha. Oh, cool, cool.
Am I back?
Your
You
screen is
still
frozen. Can you
lost?
hear me?
Am I not there on the video?
You are
Yes,
there.
I
It's
can
just
hear
I think
you,
there's some lag.
Sudeep.
Okay, cool, cool. No, I was just saying that I'm very grateful for this podcast because this itself, once it's out, becomes a resource both for me to reflect upon my own journey, my own trajectory, as well as for future students of mine who might ask, who might question. So, what were those moments in life that made you want to be a teacher? What made you start writing? How do you keep writing? Right? So, I'm going to use this very shamelessly, I'm telling you right now, as a teaching
Go for
aid
it.
for
It's
my
yours.
students. So thank you for this.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Sudeep, in having you on this podcast. And trust me, I can go on for another couple of hours very easily. There's, all I need to do is just scratch the surface about a topic, and then I know you've got so much to share. But probably more parts, more episodes is how I look at it. But it was a absolute pleasure having you, Sudeep. It was amazing talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Since you've been so kind and generous, and if you, by the way, I'm talking to you right now, audience, if you're listening right now, thank you so much for tuning in, for listening to me as well. Um, and I want to say, leave you and the audience with these last few words, if I may.
Please, please, please.
So it's just 4 lines, which serves as my gratitude, a token of my gratitude to you and our audience right now. And it goes like this: I spread my wings and bid adieu to all but you, the precious few, who ease the pain of lonesome flight in starless skies and moonless night. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Goosebumps. Okay. I'll not add anything to it. Sudeep, before we leave, I'm just going to stop the recording.